Does Xbox want Redfall to fail? This comes from Forbes, our man Paul Tassi. James, what do we have?
Some tough news out of the Xbox camp that is going to be pretty hard to spin. When it debuts next month on May 2nd, after already being delayed out of last year, Redfall is launching only with 30 frames per second options across both Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X consoles. It's not a rumor. It was announced by the official Redfall account today on Twitter, saying Redfall is launching on Xbox consoles with quality mode only. On Xbox Series X, that means 4K with 30 frames per second. For the Xbox Series S, this means 1440p still with 30 frames per second. Now, 60 frames per second performance mode will be added via game update at a later date with no frame in mind. Vincent, what's next?
So basically, they say that 60 FPS performance mode is coming at a later date, but that later date's not given at all. It could be a week, it could be a month. If you're planning to play the game at launch, like most fans are, you will be forced into the 30 FPS option, one that has become increasingly out of fashion, especially when playing on powerful next-gen console with a controller. Also, with Arcane's usually smooth combat, that feels like an additional factor that will make this feel worse. This comes from Paul Tassi. He says, I am half tempted to say that they should delay the game again until it can launch at 60 FPS performance mode, as you only get one chance to make a first impression, and 30 FPS on a shooter in 2023 on an Xbox Series X console, of all consoles, seems like a massive miss. While I've mostly liked recent footage I've seen of Redfall, which has sparked a lot of internet debates and fanboy wars, it simply will not feel good to play this at 30 frames per second after most other shooters these days are 60, and that's a fact. That's crazy. James, this is not the first game. This is not the first game even close to start releasing on these modern consoles with the expectation that they're going to be 60 frames per second, and they're not. We did a big video on Gotham Knights not being, because that turned me off from buying the game, let alone the reviews. Like, the big hit, and then the reviews came, and it was like, no shot. Remember, Plague's Tale Requiem also dropped. The first game got that update on PS5 or whatever, and it was able to play in 60 frames per second. But Requiem, the second game, launched on all these consoles in a locked 30 frames per second. Digital Foundry thinks that this is going to be more commonplace than we think. These next gen games launching at 30.
I hate that.
Tell me why.
Here's what I think. I'm really curious about the marketing for this.
Yeah.
Because you really need that initial push. You need those initial review codes to be good. But when I read launching at 4K 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second performance mode added later, this is what I envision happening. I already see the stars align in my head. This is what the stars are telling me. This is what my crystal ball says. They're telling me that this game is going to come out at a 7. This is going to be a very okay, specifically for this reason, specifically for the 30 frames per second.
Okay.
I think it's going to be pretty good in all the other respects, but 7s across the board, mainly due to this. And, there's all this discussion around it. Give it another 6 months just to fall into the radar. No one's really playing it anymore. Bad numbers.
Okay.
Not doing well. Big co-op game. People are not playing it. Then Xbox Game Pass comes in to save the day.
Yep.
And it says, we're adding it to Game Pass. And now that we've added it to Game Pass,
isn't it Game Pass Day 1?
Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck.
I'm pretty sure. It has to be.
Okay. So if it wasn't coming to Game Pass Day 1, it comes to Game Pass 6 months later. But now that it's coming to Game Pass, now that it is accessible to everyone who is a Game Pass subscriber, now they add in the 60 frames per second mode. And then it's the second push. It's not the 1, but it's the 2
with some
that comes in.
with some content.
With some added content.
Yeah.
Coming onto it's the revitalization. They're going for the underdog story that was No Man's Sky, that was all these other games. The initial release is not good, but they think they can turn it around. But at the end of the day, they shouldn't be doing this. I don't think they should be in that. They should put themselves in this position because I think that initial impression means so much. Just delay the damn game. Just delay the damn game. If it's a thing that you can get, if it's a thing that you can actually achieve, just push it.
Here's what it's got to be. I'm gonna relate it to Gotham Knights. There's a reason that Gotham Knights it wasn't 60 frames per second, and that is because with the untethered co-op, it was impossible to achieve that in the same world. Like you couldn't load a game world and have two players running 60 frames per second, like to load all of that data within the same area, I guess.
Yeah.
This has that combat in those bigger, or not combat, this has that co-op with those bigger spaces. Imagine if you're in completely different spots trying to load that very fast. Like, I don't really know. That could be the big reason. It's hard to say. Obviously, we don't know the answer. I'm sure they know the answer why they can't. I don't think they'll be transparent on why. I think they'll have to stick their guns after this statement. This comes 15 days before the game launches. Gene Park even says, this is super shocking because most of the preview and trailer footage has been in 60 frames per second, and it says playing on Xbox Series X or whatever. Xbox badly needs more W's, and this is not the one, he says.
I'm going to follow this up with another Gene Park tweet that I read this morning. It says 30 frames per second isn't a deal breaker for me either.
Yeah.
Like just to frame where Gene Park is coming from. He says, I mostly play games on my Switch, the biggest and weakest console now.
Totally.
This is just an L for Xbox because, and I think this is important, because it's marketed as being the most powerful.
Sure.
It being known as the shooter box. And shooters are better in 60 frames per second.
I mean, I'm going to be hypocritical and 2 days after this game launches, I'm going to jump into 720, 25 frames per second Tears of the Kingdom on my Nintendo Switch.
Right.
And
yeah,
I'll complain a little bit, but I'll eat my words because it's all you can do.
It's not 30 frames per second for the sake of complaining about 30 frames per second.
Right.
It's because we're supposed to be playing on like the biggest, baddest hardware that's out there right now. And so I think my question for you now, Vincent, is if this really is a hardware thing, is this the system seller for like the Series X Pro or the next console iteration as a whole?
I think this game has to be effing amazing to be a console seller, and I don't think it's going to be.
No, I'm not talking about the game. I'm talking about the tech.
No, if they have to market the next generation of Xbox consoles to say, "Oh, we guarantee your games are going to be 60 frames per second." What does that mean? There's no will. There's no goodwill. I don't know. They could just be saying that. It's like my stupid PS5 box has the 8K thing on it. Every PS5 box. No games are playing in 8K. You joking my ass?
No fucking way.
No shot. Way. Yeah. The problem is that 60 FPS for PlayStation and Xbox should be expected for a lot of these things. I understand there are cases where it can't be. And it's a bummer. But we're at the point where like that, I feel like a freaking, I don't know, entitled gamer here saying, "Oh, my game should be 60 FPS," and I really don't want to come across like that. But like, you can't release a competitive shooter. You can't release a competitive shooter when like you've released shooters like in previous generations that have more frames than this. I don't know.
But aren't we at that point, Vincent? Would it be wrong for me to say that I expect games to have the option to be played at 60 frames per second? Now, it's one thing to say I expect an option for, and another thing to say I expect all games to run at 4K 60 frames. That's unreasonable.
Yeah.
I don't expect every game to run at 4K 60 frames. But for me to not even have the option to turn down my resolution,
that's true,
to 1440 or 2K, and boost my frames, shouldn't that, I feel like that should be reasonable.
Yeah. Thinking that this is like on Xbox Series X, you're locked in at 4K 30 frames per second. That means if, let's say you don't have a 4K TV or anything either, let's say you could only have a 1080 monitor and you plug this in.
Right.
You're still locked at that 30 frames per second, baby. Like you're not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah. It would be great to see even the Series X have I'll take a 1080 60 frames per second thing. Like, sure.
That's a deep cut.
I'm in performance mode every single time. I'm always performance mode. I'll switch it back and forth to like, let's say I see something cool and I'm like, oh, I bet this will look cool in quality mode. I'll switch it over just to check it out.
Or like with ray tracing, yeah.
Yeah, but like I'm playing the game in performance and I would take the hit in resolution for sure.
Yeah. I think something that's also interesting is I wonder, someone on Twitter said, I wonder if they had analytics about how many people use quality mode over performance mode that maybe dictated this decision. Is it more popular to use quality mode and get the 4K?
I'll tell you why.
Why?
Because it defaults to that, and a lot of people don't.
Oh shit! Like, yeah.
We talking a little bubble, a little bit. People that are interested in gaming and interested in gaming news or what's going on in the gaming world, and people that maybe pay more attention than the average person to their video game.
Right.
I would say a lot of people don't know that that's even an option. They're just playing what they get out of the box. They don't know about the tuning, you know? I think about going over to like cousin's house or even roommate playing Spider-Man.
It's about motion blur.
Well, motion blur, of course. I always turn off. You got to do the Lord's work, turn off everybody's motion blur. But no, I'm talking, they're playing Spider-Man, you know, in the quality mode, and versus playing on a different console. They're like, I feel like Spider-Man's faster on the other console. As I'm like, well, you're playing at half the speed, basically. I mean, not really, but like it feels like it. And you switch it, and it's an instant change. But people don't know that they can make that change unless they're very aware of games and aware of the developments.
Right, and I think we also have developed that hypersensitivity to frame rate differences.
It's weird. It is weird.
Yeah.
So, guys, let us know in the comments what you think of this locked 30 frames per second. I am praying. Here's the deal. This is coming out just a couple weeks after Jedi Survivor and a couple days before Zelda. These are 3 huge games. Like there's
no way.
This is Xbox flagship game for like the first half of this year, right?
I mean, I will say that if it does launch on Game Pass, then I think that puts it in a somewhat of a unique position.
And it's gonna run 60 frames per second on PC.
Oh shit, yeah.
I'm sure it will. If not, that'd be even a bigger problem, I think.
That would be a huge problem.
But this being like that Xbox exclusive, like that's what it's called. That's the title. It's Redfall, Xbox exclusive. Play on Game Pass, 30 frames per second on console. It's a bummer. It's a big hit. Let us know if you're gonna pick this up still on Series X of like playing in 30. Maybe it doesn't bother you, which is totally cool. I'm not trying to yuck your yum. If you want to play this 30 frames per second, God bless you. But let us know what you think. I would like to try this. I don't have an Xbox right now, so if I do, it'll be on Game Pass on PC. So it'll be a different experience. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this, you can listen to the entire podcast. You can go on all audio platforms, type in Strictly Casual Checkpoint, and this is episode 157, titled Redfall 38 FPS Dreams Support Spider-Verse and Spider-Man 2 and a lot of other things. Or if you want to watch the entire podcast, you can go on youtube.com/strictlycasual, become a member and watch it live. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Just like that.
Peace out.